So, Jim, this week's question is, are we building too many homes in Fife? But before we delve into it, let's cue the VT.
And we're back in the room.
We're back in the room,
Just.
Yeah.
That's a braw fireplace you've got at the back there.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. By the skin of my teeth, the door opened. I got back just in time.
And I think the most important thing on here is, it's quite a provocative line, because everybody would say no or no straight away, but we need to analyse it. Are we actually building too many homes in Fife? That's the reality. It's, so do you want to kick off and give us an introduction and talk about this and what we should be looking at in the UK, what the UK and how the UK is just now, and possibly even some promises that the UK government's made for building houses, which I think is a wee bit delusional. But let's go for it.
Let's go for it, because especially if you're watching last week's show that we did, we obviously talked about we're not building enough. So then for us to come on this week and be like, are we building too many? It's a wee bit of obviously a contradiction. But as you say, we're going to get into it and discuss it in detail. So the issue of new house building in the UK stirs strong emotions, and it's definitely a talking point. Many believe their local areas are turning into construction zones. There's too much construction traffic, it's causing havoc, it's making roadworks. It brings up those emotions and talking points, with too many homes being built, disrupting the character of those towns and villages. But is this perception really grounded in reality? Now, you've got the Labour government, which came into power of summer 2024, which feels like a distant memory. They set a bold target: 300,000 homes.
Can I laugh at that already? 300,000 homes a year. Wow. It'd be interesting to see how many we're building right now every year.
Absolutely, because they said they would do that annually for the next 5 years, which in a total amounts to 1.5 million new homes by the end of their tenure. And as you're right, this sounds ambitious and perhaps a wee bit optimistic, especially
Should we use the word optimistic or delusional?
Or both. We could do both.
Possibly. Quite possibly, isn't it?
Both. Yes. Because when you consider then, as a nation, we've averaged only, and this is where obviously you do see the stark difference, we've averaged only 170 to 180,000 homes per year over the last 2 decades. So they're looking to do 300,000 for the next 5 years. Yet over the last 2 decades, we've done 170 to 180.
So basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to say they're going to build almost double the amount of properties they've actually been building over the last, dare I say, the last 10, 20 years, every single year. So they're trying to double that. What world do they live in? I mean, it's an ambitious target, and it's great to put yourself as an aspirational target itself. But the reality is we're sitting in an economy which has got full employment, unemployment level sitting at 4.4% in the UK. And that is considered just people moving from job to job, in transition and moving to job. So where exactly are we going to get the resources to build all these houses? Where are we going to get all the timber? Where are we going to get all the bricks? Where are we going to get all the electricians, the plumbers, everything? I mean, everybody's full to the gunnels, and they've got loads of business. We know that because we use contractors for the lettings, the property management, and it's difficult to get people to do a job. You ask an electrician if they're going to be able to do a job, and they'll say, maybe Christmas. Sorry, that's about 11 months away. But that's the reality. Their order books, to be honest, if you're a small business, you should really just put your prices up if you've got that sort of lead in, because then you'll obviously make more money at the end of the day, but you've got to look after yourself because you never know when there's going to be a drought. I mean, obviously, there's going to be feast just now, but famine will come eventually. Over the last decades. So when we break that down to numbers and in terms of starts, maybe completions, and also in context, what does that look like?
Yeah, of course. Now, before we get into that, someone has commented asking what is the topic. So today we are discussing, are we building too many homes in Fife? So that's what you've not missed too much. You've joined just in time, but a way to get into the details and look at it in detail. But it's about, are we building too many homes in Fife in particular? Now, so the numbers then. So in the last 12 months, the number of new homes started and completed, because that's the difference here, started and actually physically completed, across the UK has fallen significantly short of the Labour's government's target. So for instance then, housing starts is just over 134,000. Housing completions is just over 158,000.
And they're trying to get 300,000 a year.
Correct.
Dear me.
Yes. So that is, a startling truth that actually, despite obviously the title of the topic today, we are building far fewer homes than we actually need, even as the house crisis deepens.
Yeah, the housing crisis definitely deepened. In Scotland, the First Minister's actually just announced that he's going to repeal the temporary rent control legislation that's in place. So as of the 1st of April 2025, rents will no longer be controlled. It'll be open market values. And if anybody wants to challenge a rent that a landlord is setting, any tenant wants to do that, then it'll basically be market rent. So if they put it to the rent assessor and maybe they're charging, maybe the landlord says your rent's going up to 650, but the market rent's 750, then the rent assessor will just say, well, the market rent's 750, so rent passed. That's it.
Yep.
So but this is obviously on the back of the housing crisis. This is obviously the fact that there's not enough places to house people, and we've still got this crisis going on in terms of the lack of building homes, I would say. And the startling truth right there, you've just actually said it. To meet the government's goal, we've got to build, I think it's something like 10.71 homes annually per 1,000 existing homes. So whatever existing homes you've got in your area, where you are, for every 1,000, in order to keep up, you'll have to build for every 1,000 you've got. You have to build 10.71 more every single year to try and catch up. But surely we're building enough new homes in Fife.
You would think so. Despite concerns about the overdevelopment, the data does tell a different story, and you really can't argue with the data.
Okay.
The UK is just simply not building anywhere near enough homes to meet the growing population, and it's even independent studies that show this. We must deliver at least 300,000 homes annually to address decades of undersupply and support demographic changes. Again, shows that we've discussed in detail is that longer life expectancies and also smaller household sizes, that all needs to be taken into account as well.
This is what a lot of people tend to not understand. If you have an aging population, for example, whose average age is who average life expectancy, just say for sake, is, I think it could be 76 at that point in time. But if you've got that average life expectancy and it changes to 78, for example, then technically you've got another 2 years, everybody's living longer. Therefore, that means then you've got to have another 600,000 homes. Because if they're building 300,000 a year to keep up, then you've already added another 600,000 to that. So if you've got people living a lot longer, which is great, a lot healthier as well, then that's obviously going to add to the job and the fact that what you need to do. And it's what you said as well. You said smaller households. and it tends to be that people are deciding to live on their own, and they're quite happy to do that, rather than actually club together with someone else and have a partner and they both live in the same place. Sometimes people are just living in completely different homes, and I think that demographic's actually gone up quite a lot over the last 30 to 40 years. 30, 40 years, people just let's move in together. But now no, let's just keep our own places. It seems to be because it's more affordable to actually have a house now. I know a lot of people will probably disagree with that, but in real terms, it's more affordable to buy a house now and have a house now and own a house now or rent a house now than it was 40 years ago.
Yep.
Because in the 1980s, inflation was sitting at 10, 12%. Interest rates were sitting at about 15%. Base rates. Just now, base rates are sitting at, I think it's 4.75. And so mortgages are completely affordable in real terms, and salaries have gone up over the years since the last 40 years, and they've actually gone up a lot more than inflation. Therefore, they're actually able. It's more affordable to. Hence the reason why my argument is it's more affordable to buy now. If you look at rents as well, just even in the last 4 years, if you strip out inflation, rents on the real terms has only gone up about 12% in the last 4 or 5 years. So it's not a mind-blowing number like the Scottish government would make you think if you're looking at the Scottish government or even the UK government itself, because they actually claim that's the case. But the UK government's in a similar situation. Some of the rents are actually historically low in comparison. I've got a wee graph here actually. I'll just quickly look at it and see if I can find it and see if I can tell you what that number is. But it's definitely here. Here it is. Okay, and for example, in London, compared to 2016, rents adjusted for inflation compared to 2024 has actually gone down 8.3% in London. So rents in London have gone down in comparison in real terms. And the same when it comes to outer London, they've gone down 12.3%. East Anglia, they've gone down 4.4%. I mean, all the other areas have gone up marginally, maybe the 4%, the 5%. Southwest have actually gone up 44%, which is crazy. But that could be a small number, the reason that they've gone up, and that's maybe skewed the figures. But it's not the earth-shattering amount that the governments would make you think in order to justify their stance in terms of we should build more houses, or we should put rent controls in place, or we should stop people from landlords from, or we could motivate landlords to sell, or second homeowners to sell up and stuff like that. That's this is just all smoke and mirrors, and ultimately, and as we're going to probably conclude here, the UK government, the Scottish government, have just failed miserably to build enough affordable homes for people and actually need it. Not just in people in general, but just build and also encourage and create an environment where private owners and private builders can actually build to the mass market. They've not created that environment. They've made it very difficult by putting planning legislation in place and stuff like that. But we'll talk a bit more about that now. I mean, many people say we don't have actually space to build these homes, but it would surprise you that only 1.2% of England and Wales is actually built with residential homes. 1.2% of land in the whole of England and Wales is only built with residential homes. That's weird, isn't it? And then when you take Scotland into account, which is a tenth of the population but almost the same size as England, then that 1.2% actually falls dramatically, that percentage of occupied by homes. So why do we keep hearing things like, there's planning laws to stop you building in certain areas when there's almost about 99% of the land we've never ever built on? Why would they do that? It's quite difficult to get your head round that. I once heard a statistic. It actually said you could fit the whole of the world's population into Australia.
Wow.
Yeah. Not the buildings or anything, just put the population, just put everybody, like in an elevator. You know, when you get into an elevator, and here's the analogy though, when you get into an elevator and it says that's for 16 people, and you've only got 4 years there, and you go, no chance.
No, you wouldn't get me in there.
But effectively, that's what I'm saying. It's like, when you put it into that context, you kind of think to yourself, there's a lot of space to build on, so why are we not actually doing it? I mean, many people actually feel, in Fife, for example, has actually become a building site to a degree. However, statistics show that we're falling behind and not exceeding the levels required to maintain a healthy housing market.
Yep.
Now, the visible developments often mask the fact that we're still underperforming nationally overall. So let's look at these statistics locally. What are these statistics locally when we look at Fife, for example, Sophie?
Okay, so within Fife, there are 170,982 homes in Fife. And just last year, there was 1,404 new homes built. So just over 170,000
My
in
God,
Fife, and 1,400 were built last year.
that surely can't be right. We get this
Mhm.
data, and it's the correct data, isn't it? But when
It
you
is,
think about it, it's like
absolutely.
1,404 homes. That's crazy. But then when you
Yep.
look at it in terms of new homes,
Mhm.
when you look at that and you look at the benchmark, for example, this thousand per thousand existing homes,
Yep.
it was 8.21 homes built per thousand homes, which is way below the 10.71 over that
Absolutely.
time. Because ideally, if that's 10.71, and then you've got 182.9 divided by 1,000, and then multiplied by 10.71, then it should be almost approaching 2,000. So we're about 600 short.
Yep.
So it just goes to show, that's the case. So let me ask you a question and put you on the spot here.
Go for
Who's
it.
building these homes? What's the mix here between private and council and housing associations? If we break
Okay.
that down, who's the person that's ultimately contributing towards this home building project? These numbers that we've got here.
Okay, so we're going to break it down and we'll obviously get the kind of percentage, but it's very clear, and you'll see this when I tell you, that new builds are heavily skewed towards the private sector.
Mhm.
So you've got the private sector that contributes to 68.7%.
Blows that out the water, eh? Private sector again, coming home with the numbers. What's the other ones then?
So you've then got the housing associations,
Mhm.
which is 21.8%.
Okay, that's about a fifth.
Yep. And then the smallest percentage is our local authority at 9.5%.
That's about a tenth. And see, there's the failing in the system, and the very
Mhm.
fact that the people that should be building the most at this point in time, the affordable housing, is actually the council, is the local
Yep.
authority, and yet they're the people building the least.
Yep.
And so and they keep claiming they've no money to do this, but the reality is they're continuing to buy private properties back from ex-local authority properties back from the housing market, from estate agents and that,
Yep.
to fill their stock for their homeless requirements and what they need to do. But that's
Mhm.
not actually creating any new homes. That's just taking more out of the system. That's the very person that castigated private landlords for buying
Mhm.
properties out of the private sector, out of the
Yep.
private ownership sector, to actually rent. They actually
Mhm.
castigated private landlords for that, and they're doing exactly the same thing as a result. So they're not building any more new homes. And so if anybody wants to say anything about this or do anything about this, go to your local councillor, go to your local MP or MSP and complain to them about the very fact that the local authority is only building about 10% of houses in the whole of the regions right across Scotland, for example. And dare I say, I think it'll probably be right across the whole of the UK. Something clearly needs to be done about this, and not just left to the private sector to build houses at possibly unaffordable levels, for the very fact that the planning and building requirements are so high in terms of their net zero requirements.
Mhm.
Their requirements to say that this carbon footprint can't be, it has to be zero. So you've got to have ground source heat pumps, you've got to have solar panels on the ceiling, on the roof, and
Mhm.
you've got to have energy efficient boilers. Energy efficient boilers is fine, but when you start adding solar panels and ground source heat pumps, and you start insulating to a higher standard inside the property, then clearly the cost goes dramatically higher. Let me
Yep.
give you an example of this. The difference between a property a 4-bedroom property, for example, same floor space. It's an existing property. It has been built already, maybe about 30, 40 years old, built in 1970s, 1980s, or thereabouts, or maybe even in the 1950s, the ex-local authority houses. The difference in price between that and the difference in price between a new build 4-bedroom property, which has the same floor space just now, is about £120,000.
Wow. Okay.
How on earth can anybody afford that if that's the case? How could you deliver an affordable housing bill and affordable housing for people out there if you're being forced to build to a standard which is so high it pushes out the price bracket of many people and affordability levels? That's nothing to do with second homeowners, which are marginally small in comparison to these numbers. Nothing to do with private landlords, again, marginally small in comparison to these numbers. Actually, that market's declined and first-time buyer ownership has actually increased as a result for that reason. But it can't be. It's not. It's basically the failure of the governments, and the Scottish and the UK governments, to successively build houses in affordable levels over the years and actually make sure the standards are at a level where people can actually really afford them. It's a classic example. Let me give an example. When I went to buy, I'm going to show my age here. When I went to buy an Austin Metro, you have no idea what that is.
Not
A
Scooby.
Rover
No.
Metro. All these years ago, an Austin Metro, I went to buy one. And the guy turned around and says, "Why do you want to buy petrol when you could buy diesel?" And I went, "Well, why do I want to buy diesel?" And he said to me, "Well, because diesel's more efficient and you get many more miles out of it, so you get more miles to the gallon." So how much do I get on petrol then? He says, "Well, you'll get about 30 miles to the gallon." How much will I get on diesel? And he went, "You'll get about 60 miles to the gallon." Okay. That works out, if I do 10,000 miles a year, that works out double. So therefore, 10,000 miles at that time, and I was getting 30 miles to the gallon, divided by the 30 is 333 gallons. Now, it might mean I've got to pay an extra £5 for the gallon. Not at that time. I mean, at that time, I think it was an extra, this shows how cheap petrol was at that time, an extra £1 for the gallon, times £1. So basically, I'm going to save myself buying a diesel car, £333 a year. And then I said to him, "So what's the difference in price between the diesel and the petrol?" He went, "Oh, it's £3,000. Oh, so it's going to take me 10 years to get that payback if I'm only doing 10,000 miles a year. And the penny dropped with the salesman, and he thought, "Yeah, you're right. You're probably better off buying petrol."
Yeah.
It's exactly the same with the house builds now. The new house build is the diesel that I talk about in comparison to the petrol, which is existing stock. It's right here, right now. The affordability and the cost to actually recoup the money you're spending, for that reason, is actually prohibitive. And they should be looking at a scheme rather than actually doing it to this standard straight away. They should be looking at some sort of retrofit scheme. It could maybe be implemented later on when it's more affordable to do that. But that's just another story. That's another story. We'll not go down that rabbit hole anymore. But hopefully I've pointed out the stark difference in what is causing the barriers to entry for people at the higher end of the market and possibly the new build end of the market as well on affordability levels, because the standards are so high by our own government. No one's putting it on us. We're doing that. And we're doing the planning restrictions as well for land, which is in abundance all the way around about us.
Yep.
So while private developers dominate the market, the contribution to housing associations has actually been modest, if anything, and local authorities' meagre numbers of new homes is frankly quite disappointing.
Yep.
This is really a critical point. Without a greater push for the public sector, especially our local authority, the affordable housing shortfall will continue to persist. So let me ask you a question, Sophie.
Go for it.
Why aren't we building enough homes in the UK?
Okay, so several reasons. There's that gap between aspirations and then, of course, reality. So first of all, you've got like a planning bottleneck. Now, there's many developments that are held up by protracted planning process and the local opposition.
Yeah.
Then something else, and we've touched on it already, is land availability, a lack of suitable land, which is, is it tied up perhaps in green belts, or is it being used agriculturally?
Agricultural, yeah.
There's actual limits of where these homes can be built.
It's
Another
interesting
reason.
with the first one, you actually said the planning bottlenecks, and many developments are actually held up by protracted planning processes because that can easily be solved if they've got the will to solve it, can't it?
Well, yeah, but as you say, it's the
Yeah.
will. Yeah.
What's the third one you would say then?
So third one, again, we've touched on it, but it's the labour and material shortages, but
Yeah.
also not just the shortages, but also the cost of materials as well.
Mhm.
Post-pandemic and post-Brexit, the construction industry, it was struggling with a lack of skilled workers on top of rising material costs.
Yeah.
That's a massive factor, especially when you say it's got to be done to such a standard, and then the costs on top of that.
Yeah.
And then finally, there is also an element of the kind of resistance to change.
Oh, the NIMBY. The NIMBY brigade, not in my backyard.
Yeah, yes, that, yeah,
Yeah, the local opposition from new developments, significant barriers, claiming all the time, and quite rightly so. They've got a good argument here, but some of them are actually out just to stop the whole development completely.
hmm
We had it
yeah,
years ago. We had it years ago, actually, across the road. I'm not going to say the development, but we had it years ago where they wanted to build 300 homes, and there was a complete resistance. And somebody went around with a petition. We weren't really sure what we were doing, but we just went, yeah, we'll support you because we like this person. And they ended up, it never got zoned for housing. And so over the next 10 or 20 years, it never got used. And it's only recently that all these new houses were built on there. And so these are the sort of things that can actually get stopped.
mhm,
Let's talk about it in Fife. Let's look at the new school. The new school, my kids went to Madras
yeah,
in St Andrews, and it was supposed to be before they went. It was supposed to be promised that there was going to be a new school. It was only built last year.
hmm
My kids are now 25 and 23,
yeah,
and it was all because not in my backyard. They wanted to stop it for that very reason. So so these are the things we've got to take account of, and actually just maybe take a stance on this and say no, we're doing it whether you like it or not, because it's for the better for the better good
mhm,
of everybody else.
yeah,
The benefit of the many outweighs the few, I would say, in that instance. And
yeah,
yeah, the tables could turn. It could happen to myself one day, and it's just because I've said this, and it's just something you've probably just got to grin and bear. But
mhm,
with the fact that there's an abundance of land, like we just said, then
yeah,
why should it be a problem?
mhm, absolutely.
That's what I would say. Quite rightly so. The difficulty out of building new homes. Let's break this down.
hmm
You build 1,000 new homes in an area, then you have to decide how you're going to get all these children into school. The
hmm
school's got to be bigger.
yeah,
There's got to be more dentists. There's
yeah,
got to be more doctors. There's got to be more nurses. There's got to be more infrastructure. You've got to have an upgrade to the electrical system, for electricity. It's not just a case that you can just go, yeah, we'll plug it into the existing supply, because maybe the interconnector, whereas the main bus where all the main huge amounts of electricity come into, is actually not big enough to cope with the new feeds that come off it, just like a fuse box when it comes into your house, and then you've got smaller ones that come off of that as a result. So that's the
yeah,
main interconnector has to be upgraded. And it's the same for gas as well, the same situation for gas. So all the infrastructure round about it. For example, as well, you've got the EV cars which have appeared. Now we've all got to have three-phase converters apparently into our homes. So, and
mhm,
none of the homes have got them. I think the new build homes have got them, but the existing homes don't. So all that infrastructure has to be upgraded again. But
yeah.
the reason I'm saying that is because it's not just a case of, oh, we can throw 1,000 houses up. It is a bigger picture, isn't it?
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah, there's the local impact and what that does for homeowners in Fife.
Yeah,
You know, the lack of sufficient new builds does have real
real
consequences.
consequences. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that kind of restricted supply of home contributes to how, higher prices and
Mm.
limited options for both buyers and renters. So for those looking to move, the challenge isn't just finding that buyer, but it's securing their next home and moving forward as well. There's frustrations for people, as as Jim, yourself as well, being heavily involved in the local Fife property market. It's not just about the numbers, it's how it affects people's lives as well. And that's why we always encourage people to come and speak to us as well. We can discuss it with you. We're more
It's
than
better
happy
to reach out and get an idea of that information. We'll talk about the way forward in a minute, but this is quite interesting because I get all the stats for the housing. So housing in Fife, apparently, the average house price in Fife is 178,000. This is by the Office of National Statistics, so it's all fact. 178,000. Average salary is well over 30,000 in Fife. That's where it is apparently. So when you take that multiplier, anything under 6 times is actually quite a buoyant housing market, and it should continue to thrive as a result. It's not overpriced, it's not overheated. But when you go beyond that, then you get unaffordable levels. So hence the reason why buyer demand for house prices that go up starts to go in, the number of people that can actually buy that type of house because of the cost of it. But prices from year on year in Fife then have gone up 3.4%, up to the 178,000. The average rent in Fife, again, this is another thing that the Scottish government seem to get wrong or misinterpret or mislead the public. They're saying we're approaching well over £1,000 and we're at 1,100, 1,200 and all the rest of it. But the average monthly rent in Fife is £801. That's average. That's the average. And for the Scottish areas, for the broad market rental areas in Fife, and that means rents, put my teeth back in, put my brain in gear as well. Annual rent increases have actually gone up 6.1%. Now, inflation's been round about 2.5 to 3%. So in real terms, rents have actually gone up about 3% in that time. Average salaries have gone up 5% year on year. So my question then would be, is rents outpacing salaries? Possibly not. Possibly not.
Not when you put it like that.
Yeah. The average price a first-time buyer pays for in Fife for a property surprises me, because when I could only afford a £20,000 flat when I first started. And it wasn't during the war, by the way. I'm not that old.
We would never say that. We wouldn't say that.
In the 1980s, late 1980s, my first flat was £20,000, a 2-bedroom lower flat. Today, first-time buyers on average in Fife are paying £143,000 for a property. It's like, what? It's like, really? Wow, 143 grand. Wow. And that's actually 3.4% higher than the average was in the year before, which was 138,000. So the average price for first-time buyers has gone up just about the same as well. It's quite interesting when you look at these numbers. It still makes Fife a very affordable proposition. And with the advent of for example, train stations and the availability of them, for example, in Leven now, and Markinch, and Dunfermline, and Cooper, and Lookers for St Andrews area, you could easily commute over to Edinburgh. So working in Edinburgh, or being able to work remotely, and your job being in Edinburgh, but not needing to be there all the time, there's a huge advantage to actually relocate to Fife, and the prospect that affordability levels and your running costs will be significantly lower in comparison to having to stay in Edinburgh. Now, there's swings and roundabouts here. If you look at Edinburgh, for example, you've got the town centre, you can go to the theatre easily at the drop of a hat and stuff like that, but you can still do that on the train within an hour from anywhere in Fife. But also, what you don't really have, possibly in Edinburgh, you don't have beautiful Fife Coastal Path, for example.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a show without you getting that in.
You don't have the abundance of golf courses that Fife has and golf clubs. At one point in time, Fife had 50 golf clubs. That's mental.
Yeah.
And I think that's possibly still the case. They've still got all these golf clubs. There's a huge amount in Fife area. And it literally, because the home of golf in St Andrews. It is literally the London of Fife. As opposed as well, you've got Ely, which is similar as well in terms of price point, but actually they both sit smack bang on the coastline and overlook beautiful golden sandy beaches. What is not to love by living in Fife? It's God's country.
Absolutely.
So then that then makes me, what is the way forward then? What is the way forward, Sophie?
So we need to address the housing crisis because we need a balanced approach.
Let's hope Paul McLennan, the housing minister's actually listening to this right now, because you're just about to tell him what he should be doing.
Absolutely am. So Paul, open your ears. Yes. So empowering all the local authorities and the housing associations to build more affordable homes. We need more than
Yep.
9.5%, contribution from local authority.
Yep.
Streamline the Fife planning system.
Yep.
So that it reduces the delays and it creates certainty for developers, and it creates the people not going, do you know what, I'm not even going to bother because I can't be bothered with the hassle. So we need to make it more streamlined and more kind of approachable, engaging communities to find that common ground between development and also preserving the local character as well.
Yeah.
And finally, supporting sustainable building practices so that we can ensure, new developments meet both the needs of current and also future generations to come. So it's about finding that balance.
Hence the reason why I talk about retrofit, about the fact that, you could possibly retrofit some of the things that you're doing right now for the prospect of the future, but is there a possibility you can actually just do them on a retrofit later on? So you're not needing to do them right now. Because I have a sneaking suspicion in 10 years' time, the standard will be completely different and they'll be going back to what they've originally fitted and think that's now obsolete.
Yep. It's almost a
So
classic, why if it's not broken.
So building 300,000 homes a year is a steep climb, but it's one that the UK needs to tackle head on, and even every local authority, including Fife and Edinburgh and Dundee and Glasgow and that. The question is not whether we're building too many homes, but whether we're actually building enough. The answer is quite clearly a resounding no.
No.
Now, I certainly know for building these extra homes in Fife, the infrastructure alongside these homes also need to rise as well, like new schools and extra capacity for our hospitals, as I said before. And, this is the sort of thing we need to have an open conversation and engage about as well. If anybody's thinking about doing anything about this or they want to know more information about this, please feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to have a discussion with you, especially if you're thinking about buying a new build potentially, and you've maybe got an existing house, you're thinking, maybe I could retrofit, maybe I could do something with that to adapt to me anyway, and it would maybe not necessitate the reason for moving, for example. And now, I know that sounds completely foreign for somebody that's actually an estate agent to say, maybe you shouldn't move. But you never know. You don't know what you don't know, and it's our job to tell you, inform you what you don't know. And it's about getting the facts, which is more important, to make an informed decision for your future. After all, you don't want to move to the next house only to find out it was the wrong thing to do.
And you've got to move again. Yep.
And on that cheery note, thank you so much for your time, Sophie. Really appreciate it for leading that for us. If anybody's got a question to ask later on, stick it in the comments. You're listening to the podcast on Spotify, on Apple, on Anchor, or whatever platforms we've got. Please feel free to make a comment as well. Reach out, email us at info@fifeproperties.co.uk. And next time, we'll have the show. Saturday's show. Now, let me just check what Saturday's show is going to be, and I'll quickly just tell you the Saturday morning show. Watch out for that one. We are going to be talking about home decor trends. In other words, home decoration trends. 5 of the year's top interior design styles. That's going to be Richard and I. That's going to be an interesting conversation because Richard's a whiz when it comes to improvement and actually creativity, whereas I'm a magnolia and white skirtings and facings person.
It wouldn't do for everybody to do the same.
So, for anybody listening in on Saturday morning at 9:30, you're going to get the best of both worlds. Until next time, thanks very much for coming on, Sophie, and it's bye-bye from us.
Take care. Bye for now.